From South Bend, Indiana, welcome to 3 Degrees Discussions. I'm your host, Mike Vasquez. This is a podcast devoted to the stories behind the innovators, entrepreneurs, and leaders in the 3D printing industry.
We had a strategy in place where we thought at that time, 10 years ago, a lot of customers are not necessarily ready yet to take printers in-house and move products into additive. And if we had a service bureau offering alongside just the sale of printers, we're going to be able to have an adoption path for these customers saying, okay, don't commit to, buying capital equipment.
That was Tali Rosman. Tali is a recognized business leader in the additive manufacturing space, having worked on multiple deals throughout the sector and throughout her career. In today's episode, she shares her career journey with stops along the way at Stratasys and Xerox. Before we get started, head over to www.3degreescompany.com and subscribe to the podcast. Remember, you can listen to the show anywhere you download your podcasts, including Spotify, Apple, Amazon, or Stitcher. Also, if you or your company are looking for materials, qualification, or general additive manufacturing support, reach out to the team through our website or via email at info@3degreescompany.com. All right, Tali, thanks so much for joining the show today. Excited to have you on. Like we do with all our guests, would love to just start at the beginning. So, where were you born? Kind of what were some of those early motivations or inspirations for you to kind of put you on the path of where you are today?
Yeah, first of all, thanks for having me. Pleasure talking to you. I've been listening to a few episodes and I'm really excited to be here today. So I'm a Tel Aviv, Israel, born and raised. And I've done probably the classic Israeli route of high school, military service, university, and then straight into work. Since then, the short version is I've lived and worked in 6 different countries in 3 continents, and I'm now no longer just Israeli, but also German and American, the trifecta. And I've been in the additive space for about 10 years, but I didn't actually start my career in additive manufacturing. So after university, I went into management consulting, essentially a strategic advisory, working with a range of companies in a range of industries on their strategy, business, go-to-market, financial issues. So everything that has to do with the non-technology aspects of it, if you will. And through management consulting, I got into the world of mergers and acquisitions, so corporate development, which is mostly M&A, but also minority investments in startups and the like. And I've done it in technology companies. And then that's when Stratasys approached me and offered me to join their corp dev team. And this was, as I was saying, 10 years ago when Stratasys was in the heyday of buying companies, investing in companies. And so I joined in the corp dev hat to Stratasys, not really knowing what additive manufacturing is, and actually, disguising my ignorance in the industry very well, I think, in my first few weeks, as I was already plunged into a negotiation to acquire a company. And yeah, I mean, pretty much through that experience in Stratasys of buying companies, investing in additive manufacturing startups. Some of them are well familiar and we can talk about them. That's how I got to know the industry, fall in love with it, and have built my career in this space in the last 10 years.
And what was it about either consulting or kind of that sort of environment cadence, what you're doing with companies appealed to you? Like what was your interest in that? Did you have a particular thing that you were aiming to do? Did you always want to do M&A? Did you want to always work in certain sectors? What was kind of the drive for you to pursue that path?
Yeah, it was interesting because I actually never had a career plan. I never had any, where do I see myself in 5, 10 years, etc. But I knew that I do get bored kind of quickly. And so with consulting, you're moving between different things, both different industries and different projects, but also you're touching on strategy, you're touching on sales, you're touching on product, you're touching on finance. So there's a lot of diversity. You really get to see the big picture of business. And I think that's the thing that appealed to me the most. I feel sometimes, especially in larger companies, if you're in a specific department, you just see one aspect of the business. And I always wanted to sit on the top and see how all those pieces are working together. And assuming you're not the CEO, certainly not when you're 25, the only way to really do it is if you're in management consulting or in the kind of strategy corp dev types of roles.
And how did you find Stratasys?
So Stratasys found me, which was nice because honestly, I think if you told me 11 years ago that I would develop a career in manufacturing, I don't think I would have believed you that much. So I was, as I was saying, working in mergers and acquisitions in a company called Amdocs, which is a very large technology company. And there were a lot of kind of Amdocs people who moved to Stratasys, including the person who was my boss. And he told me about this amazing thing called 3D printing, and it's really great, and I should check it out. And they have a lot of money, and they're really going to be acquisitive. So, somebody coming from corporate development, mergers and acquisitions, hearing that you're going to be able to work in a lot of deals, that's pretty much the number one thing you're looking for. And so I went to visit the Stratasys facility in Rehovot in Israel, and I saw it, and I was blown away by the technology. It just, I couldn't believe what I was seeing, kind of the part being made out of thin air. And I got really excited about the technology, and again, really excited just about the potential of what Stratasys was trying to do at the time, which has become the largest 3D printing company in the world by way of mergers, acquisitions, and investments in startups.
And when a company wants to grow via mergers and acquisitions, like from where you're sitting, like what are you trying to do? Are you trying to scout companies? Are you trying to see like on the balance sheet, how does this make economic sense? Like to someone who's like not in that world, that seems kind of foreign. Like how do you, like, how do you come in and like, what's that process of like making a deal or scouting a deal look like?
Yeah, great question. So it should be a combination of two things, of the financials and of the strategic fit. So the strategic fit, if you're in Stratasys, for example, when we did the acquisitions of the service bureaus, Solid Concepts and Harvest, which then formed SDM, and actually, interestingly enough, Stratasys in the last couple of months have been shedding some of those assets that we bought, but we had, parking the financials on the side for a second, which is critical. We had a strategy in place where we thought at that time, 10 years ago, a lot of customers are not necessarily ready yet to take printers in-house and move products into additive. And if we had a service bureau offering alongside just the sale of printers, we're going to be able to have an adoption path for these customers, saying, okay, don't commit to buying capital equipment for high six figures, low seven figures. Start off small by just moving parts. You'll see that the technology works, that the quality's there, that everything's there. You're going to get comfortable. And then when you're ready and the amount of parts you're running through the machines makes sense, now you can also buy these machines from us. So there was a strategic fit. And the other thing is obviously the financials have to make sense. You're going to be spending money to buy these companies. The revenue needs to be there, the cash flow needs to be there, the company's profitability needs to be there. And I'm sure a lot of people are going to be smirking because we did spend a lot of money on buying these companies. So probably, in retrospect, a little more than we should have. But that's kind of the combination, is the strategic and the financial. And in corporate development, you're also doing two things, right? There's really scouting of companies, which is how I got to be really well familiar with the industry, because, when you're the person with the checkbook, everybody wants to talk to you. So, I'd go into the conference and it was nice. We were kind of celebrities because of the checkbook. So you talk to everybody and you create, a big database of companies. So, based on your strategy and, if we want to add metal capabilities, if we want to have service bureau capabilities, okay, here are the companies in this space. Here's who makes sense. And obviously, aside from, let's call it the very structured processes that you usually have of, well, this is our strategy. Now let's go scout companies that meet these criteria. Then let's approach them. Let's start the negotiation, etc. There's also opportunistic, right? Certain companies that are just putting themselves up on the shelf for a sale, and maybe it's not exactly the number one priority of the company, but right now there's a good opportunity to buy a good company with good technology at a reasonable price.
And how do you, I mean, this probably sounds like a stupid question, but like, how do you put a number or how do you value a company? Like what are the, like, what's the sales price? Like when you go and do some of these, do you have a number in mind that you're trying to negotiate to, or is there like an equation that kind of, that you
Yeah,
think?
it's there's a science and there's an art. And art is often subjective, as you can tell with some of the deals. But but first things first, there's a lot of publicly traded companies in your industry, certainly more now than there were 10 years ago. And so you kind of know what a reasonable valuation is based on the multiples, right? Today, if you're going to look at publicly traded 3D printing companies, doesn't matter if it's Stratasys, 3D Systems, Desktop Metal, um, all the ones that are publicly traded, you can see what is the multiple. So, enterprise value divided by the company's revenues, or enterprise value divided by the company's EBITDA, or basically divided by the company's profitability or cash flow. So there are certain expectations in every market. Um, and then the other thing, the part of the art of, not the science, is obviously the negotiations with the other side. And there's a big difference if you're coming from a position of strength, meaning the other side, let's say they're not cash flow positive, they're at risk of continuing to live, and you're coming from a position of strength. Or maybe it's the opposite. Maybe they have other companies that have bid for them as well, and now you're in kind of a bidding process, which for example, and since it's been so long, we can talk about it, but we were eyeing Concept Laser and Arcam as well at the same time that GE was looking at them, right? So then you're not in a position of power, and there's another player that can outbid you.
Got it. Got it. And so as you could kind of started your kind of career in additive, like um, where did it progress from there? Like, so you see a lot of deals with Stratasys, you're seeing a lot of companies. Um, how did your perception of the industry grow? How did your um, understanding or motivation to stay in the industry like evolve over that time?
Yeah, I think um, obviously the industry has a lot of potential, right? That's why you're in it. That's why I'm in it. This is why we're still seeing so many startups coming into the industry. But as of today, um, nobody has yet figured out the way to make a truly big, truly profitable 3D printing company. So I think the business models are still um, need to prove themselves, right? And that's evident in the publicly traded companies. Again, we're saying Stratasys, 3D
Do you
Systems,
think it's a
Fellow,
fun,
Desktop
do you think
Metal.
like it's a fundamental
So if
flaw,
I
or is
thought,
it like a, hey, there's a lot of companies, but everyone's just doing it wrong, or like they're well run, or they've made mistakes, or like what do you think is the underlying cause if everyone's not doing well?
yeah, so when everyone's not doing well, it's to your point, which I think you're spot on. There's a question of, okay, maybe it's just a fundamental issue with the industry. Or is it, no, there's money to be made in this space. It's just for various reasons, nobody has figured it out yet. I think if I thought it was the first, that there's absolutely no way to make money in the industry, then I wouldn't be in it. And certainly you're seeing a lot of very smart investors still pouring money into the industry, in spite of the fact that the return on investment in our sector has been significantly worse, I would say, than the capital markets performance. And I think the reason they're doing it, the reason I'm committed to the additive space, is because I think there is potential. I think somebody we'll figure it out. And kind of like a lot of other industries, it's one of those things where we're going to look back 20 years from now, and we're going to see in retrospect the company that cracked the code, and we're going to say, oh yes, it was obvious. This is, and to get an analogy from another industry, I mean, AI has been around for a decade, and one of the companies I was involved in, we had an AI offering, and I can tell you it didn't gain traction, and it was losing money, etc. And lo and behold, November 2022, a year ago, ChatGPT came, and boom, overnight, literally overnight. I think they got to 1 million users in 5 days. They cracked the code, and within a year, less than a year of commercializing the product, they're on $1.3 billion revenue run rate, which, just to put that in perspective, that's like Stratasys and 3D Systems, the two biggest companies in the industry combined. So I think similar to that, somebody is going to figure it out in the industry. I think some of the issues were technology driven. I think some of the issues are go-to-market driven. Some of it is not exceptional management. And since I know most of the CEOs, I won't be naming names, but
it's also hype as well, right? Like if you set expectations so high that in 3 years you're going to be selling 1 million machines, it's hard to overcome that. And if that's tied to a stock price or a valuation, like, and the rubber meets the road, it's like it's hard to achieve that sometimes, right? Is there chicken and the egg? You have to show the value, but at the same time, like, be realistic, right?
Yeah, and I came from the software space, and it might sound very basic to say it, but it's a realization that took us a while to get to, is that hardware doesn't scale the same way as software. Software is incredibly easy to scale. Also, kind of once you developed it, your gross margins on every sale are very close to 100. But hardware it's not procured the same way. It doesn't scale the same way. There's a lot more fixed costs that are associated with it. So, the thinking I had, and a lot of other people I'm familiar with, including a lot of the VCs that invested in the industry, of expecting to see that software hockey stick growth in a hardware and manufacturing space, that's obviously not realistic. And I think a lot of companies need to, a lot of investors, a lot of companies are calibrating their expectations now accordingly. That obviously excludes the kind of bubble we had 3 years ago when companies were SPACing right and left based on unrealistic expectations. But I think by and large, there's a lot more maturity in the industry than there used to be.
And as you think about it, as you look at companies, one of the other pieces in terms of the financials is how people build their teams, and kind of, I come from the engineering side, so I can look at technology and see the engineering part, but like from where you sit and looking at the company kind of top down, what are some of the important concepts around team that you look for in terms of roles and how people are managing and think about strategy and tactical and engineering stuff? Like, how do you think about that? What's your perspectives?
Yeah, I think a lot of the companies in the industry, and certainly a lot of the companies I'm working with nowadays as an advisor, is that they're extremely technology focused. So you have a lot of engineers that are developing incredible technologies, and they're very passionate about their technologies, but they have a bit of a blind spot in terms of, how do I make money out of it? Like, what's a sustainable business model for my company? And sometimes you fall in love with your invention and your technology, and you're not really thinking about, but does somebody actually need it? Is somebody willing to pay money for it? Just because it's a different way to make a part doesn't make it better.
And with that, you're not at Stratasys anymore. So like, what after Stratasys, like what was your next kind of progression in your career path?
Yeah. So first of all, for the last year, I've been, for the first time ever in my life, not W-2 employee on a payroll. And the last role that enabled me now to be independent was managing LM Additive at Xerox. So this is about 4 or 5 years ago. Xerox approached me because they were looking to commercialize their, it's called non-core assets, things that are not part of the Xerox core business. And as they were mapping all the different assets that they have through the different research centers they had, like Park, Palo Alto Research Center, which was obviously kind of a legendary research center for the last 50 years. XRCC, which is the materials one in Canada, and the Webster Accelerator, which is more focused on hardware in upstate New York. What they saw is that they have a lot of innovations relating to 3D printing, a lot of patents. There were also the Vader folks that were part of the Webster Accelerator up in New York in terms of the hardware with the liquid metal jetting technology that they've developed. And Xerox thought, oh, can we actually build this into a company? Can we make a business out of it? And that's the part that I joined. And we essentially formed a company called LM Additive, which was a wholly owned subsidiary of Xerox. Started kind of taking some assets from different parts of Xerox, primarily the liquid metal jetting technology, into it, and then building a strategy, building a plan, like which products are we going to market? How is this going to look? Who are we going to sell it to? What could be the financials? And, what could be the exit path? Because at the end of the day, Xerox really what they wanted to achieve is to build a few of these, let's call it non-core companies. And we built a few at the same time. We built one in clean tech, one in IoT, LM Additive, which I was in charge for, and 3D printing. And the idea was, okay, let's build each of them, make them into companies that can kind of stand on their own 2 feet, and then spin them off and sell them. And, at the end of the day, after a very long story, but we sold LM Additive into Aditech. And so did all the other startups and the research center. So now kind of Xerox and is really focusing on its core. And the nice thing about LM was kind of being a general manager, so the CEO of that subsidiary. You really get to, if we were talking about seeing the big picture and getting engaged in all the different activities, I kind of feel like everything I've done in my career till then gave me a little piece of the pie. So if I started in a technology unit in the military, in the Air Force in Israel, okay, so I've done a little bit of technology, a bit of strategy, corp dev, product management, sales, and then coming to a GM role is, okay, now here is how all these different pieces that I've done in my career come together. Because as a GM, I wasn't the finance person, but I managed a finance person. I wasn't a technology person, but I managed, the R&D and engineering leaders. And, I'm not a salesperson, but I managed the sales and marketing folks as well.
And so with that, I mean, what was the biggest thing you learned as in that role? Like what sticks out as a kind of a big learning that you'll take with whatever you're kind of doing next?
Ooh, that my old boss was right about so many things. It's a horrible thing. It's like, you find out as you get older that your parents were right about a lot of things. So I had incredible bosses along my career that taught me a lot of lessons. And it's not until that you get to that kind of position of the GM and being the decision maker that you see how many of these things are true. So it wasn't about, I think, learning something new as much as about really understanding a lot of the things that I saw on the sideline. So I think, one is, the need to focus, right? It's so easy to get distracted with ad hoc opportunities, especially when you're building a startup and you're really just kind of looking to make that sale, or you're looking to get that little breakthrough. And there's so many customers that can derail you from your focus and what you need to do. Obviously, I learned a ton about hiring, firing, building a team, sustaining a team, and also shutting off lower performers in the team. And I think lastly, and might be a unique learning, I learned that building a startup in a corporate is you're not really a startup. You're still part of a corporate, and while that carries a lot of advantages, I think I underappreciated before joining LM just how many challenges that brings with it.
Like in terms of process, like overhead, or like not being able to move fast, or what get?
Yeah. And it's very evident now that, I'm working as an advisor with a few startups. I can tell them, okay, so one of them, should do a great example. One of them did a press release before FarmNext, and it was just me and the CEO. The CEO basically wrote it up. I gave him, some pointers, and okay, that's it. This is the press release. Let's go. Versus if you're trying to do a press release as a startup, but you're part of a corporate, there's about 12 different approvers that you need. And, oh, he's out of office. She needs to be, grabbed on the phone and nudged. And everybody has his own red lines, and obviously they're contradicting each other. So even something as straightforward as just, saying, oh, we have a printer out there in the market, which was 20 minutes work with that startup, and just a short ping pong between me and the CEO. We said, okay, this looks good. All right, let's send it out, versus a process that takes you weeks, if not even a couple months, and a significant amount of effort.
Got it. And so now you've been kind of doing your own consulting, working with a number of different companies. What's exciting? Like, what are you excited about on the horizon here? Like both in terms of your own career and maybe even the industry, and kind of the what's coming over that next hill or next mountain?
Yeah, so I think the thing that excites me about the industry is that I'm really seeing it maturing. And by maturing, I mean really understanding that it's not about just I developed a cool printer or a novel way to make something. You really have to have a use case behind it. You really have to know what you're targeting in terms of parts. You really have to build a business case for the customer, because otherwise everybody's going to continue to sell the onesies, twosies to a few of the research centers and the universities, the ones that what I call they buy the one of each, and but you're not really going to scale, and certainly you're not going to make money. So I'm seeing in the conversations with founders and CEOs, and obviously in the conversations with investors, a lot more emphasis on the monetization, on the business case, on the go-to-market aspects, and not just on the technology.
Do you see any particular industries that are adopting additive or applications more so than they were 2, 3, 4 years ago?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's starting to kind of scale across the board. Certainly defense is the one that I think in the short term, kind of, next 2 to 3 years is the most amount of money to be made, especially in the US. But I think that also holds true globally. The combination of the vulnerabilities in the supply chains that COVID exposed, and then top it off with everything that's going on in the world with the geopolitical tensions, whether if it's with China, Russia, etc., really fleshed out the need to, let's say, even if you're not gonna reshore all of manufacturing, you want to at least have the ability to produce parts locally on your own and kind of have more resiliency into your supply chain. And that really lends itself to additive manufacturing. So if you look at the DoD budget for 2024, and if you just look more broadly at the statements that are being made in the US by the White House, there's going to be a lot more money in the DoD, in the DOE, in the Department of Energy, and the Department of Commerce flowing into additive in the next couple of years. And then in industry, I think, as the technologies are improving, both in the quality, but also in the throughput and their economics, I do think additive is going to go, today the sweet spot of additive, we always used to say, is low volume, high value. I think we're moving more and more into medium volume and medium value, which opens a ton more applications. I don't think we're going to be seeing additive being used to produce millions of the same part, but I mean, we're going from hundreds to thousands, tens of thousands, even hundreds of thousands in certain cases.
And do you see the evolution of the the companies tracking with that? I mean, even in your case, right? You're working with a number of different companies. You have your own company kind of doing all this. Like, how do you kind of keep on top of all of the different changes and like your pulse on the industry? Like, what are you doing in terms of, is it talking to people? Is it going to conferences? Like, how do you kind of get your mental model of how the additive world is going?
Yeah, so it's all of the above. And in that regard, I have to say it's pretty nice not being tied to one company, because now I can do, LinkedIn reach outs to people from industry influencers to users of AM to non-users of AM that maybe should be using AM, and also all the technology companies, and I can do it under a very neutral, not trying to sell you a printer here or convince you to invest in anything. I really just want to have a conversation so I can be more educated on the industry. So I'm having a lot of phone calls and Zooms with a lot of people from the industry, and then definitely a lot of going into conferences. But what I did change is, instead of just going to additive manufacturing conferences, so Formnext, AMUG, etc., I started going, and I'll do so more in 2024, to non-additive conferences around manufacturing, defense, supply chain, and kind of try to tap outside the usual suspect pool and see what it will take for them. Because additive manufacturing today is what 1% of the global manufacturing pie is kind of the number everybody's using. So that's great. That means 99% are not using it. I want to talk to those 99% and understand what are the barriers, what's missing, and how the technologies that are here today can overcome them.
Awesome. So just last couple questions. Going into the new year, what's kind of one thing that's super exciting to you, either personally in kind of you building your kind of consulting offering or in the industry? Like what things kind of top of mind for you in 2024?
Yeah, I think this is the first year in God knows how long that I'm not closing the book, so to speak, in a fiscal year. So actually enjoying, the Christmas and New Year time will be a nice refresher. But on a more serious note, really I am seeing again a lot more interesting, more mature, sober discussions around additive manufacturing. And so I think looking into 2024, I'm very optimistic about a portion of the companies and a portion of the technologies. Certainly not everybody, but I think there's a lot of exciting things that are coming in 2024.
Awesome. And so more of a fun question that I've ended a lot of podcasts with. So what's a favorite book or inspiration that you've taken in terms of your career and that you might want to share with others as they kind of embark on their own additive or non-additive career?
I think Crossing the Chasm is one of the must-read books for people who haven't. This is about how do you take a product like 3D printing, for example, that's, let's call it, is still in the early adopter phase, and you move it into mainstream. And actually, one of the versions of the book, not the original one, but one of the releases, has a chapter. They've added a chapter referring to 3D printing. So I think that's a great read. And then on the startup front, if somebody hadn't read the classics of The Hard Thing About Hard Things or 0 to 1, I would definitely recommend putting them on your list.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Tali. Great to talk to you. We look forward to seeing you at shows or wherever it may be, not additive or additive, in the coming years.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.